Hi, thanks for watching this video. Today I'm going to show you how to incorporate Vue Js into any HTML page. I'm going to assume that you don't really know how to make an HTML page. Even if you do, I'm going to go basically from scratch and show you everything. It's going to be super simple. I'm going to make a button that's going to change some text. And to do that, we're going to need a couple sections in the Vue configuration, including a method. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a directory open here. It really doesn't matter what directory it is, or whether you're using Windows or Linux or Mac. You want to open up Visual Studio Code or whatever text editor you're using. It's really up to you how you want to do this. But if you want to follow along one for one, I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to right click on this folder and say open with code. It's going to open this directory or folder inside of Visual Studio Code. And up here, if you click this button here, it's for a new file. We're going to create our first HTML file. So first HTML page.html. Click enter. It's going to create the HTML page. Now before we go on, if you're not familiar with Visual Studio, up here you can always get back to your files with this Explore button. But go down to extensions for a second. I want to show you a couple extensions I think that'll be helpful. One would be the HTML snippets. The other would be HTML boilerplate. If you plan on styling, getting any further, I would also recommend the HTML CSS support. So a few helpful extensions. You don't have to do that by any means. It'll certainly speed up your production. So, all right. So if I go in here and I type HTML, that boilerplate extension that I was talking about will allow us just to basically type HTML, and then you have that option. It'll do that for us. If we go down here, let's put a header, so an H1 tag. The snippets is saying, hey, do you want that? Yeah, that's what what didn't let us there. Retype it. The snippets is going to find that H1. You can do it that way. If you just feel like typing it out, it doesn't take very long to type it out. Visual Studio is smart enough to kind of auto-complete that if you have the right extensions and everything. So we're not going to do anything with that quite yet. Let's go ahead and also create a button. And in the button, just type change text. For now, I guess in the header, let's type something like hello world. And the cool thing about HTML, if you haven't done much programming or you don't know much about programming, or even if you do, but the HTML you can just open up in any old browser if you're not using a whole bunch of stuff with it. Even if you are with like JavaScript or CSS, it'll still work. And it'll kind of show you where you're at, so it'll open up it'll render that file for you in the browser, which is really, really nice. So that's one way to do it. Visual Studio has ways of opening it too, but for now I'm not too worried about that. So to actually incorporate Vue Js, we're going to use a CDN, which is basically a script tag, and it is going to allow us to not have to use the Vue command line tool or any of that kind of stuff that gets more complicated. We're going to keep this nice and simple. So I'm at the official vuejs.org website, and I will put this in the description below. But I'm going to copy this CDN here. It's under installation CDN. If I come back here, at the very bottom of the body, go ahead and get rid of this script tag, and you can just paste what we just put over it or just copied. So if you go below, create another script section. Just press enter to get some space there. And then what we can do now is actually create the view section. What we're going to want to do is wrap the H1 and the button in what's known as a div. And to do that, simply like that. To quick cut, I did Control X. To paste, I did Control V. So let's set an ID here. View start. That's just an identifier, so we can tie into that element and say, hey, we want to target that element on the page. And then we're going to do a new view instance. That's the syntax, at least for what we're going to be using today. And that's going to create a new view instance for us. Then inside the Vue instance, we're going to type EL, and then we're going to target that ID. So like if you know anything about CSS selectors or anything like that, target an HTML element for an ID specifically, use the pound sign, and then type the name of that ID. This should target that specific element. And this will allow us to use Vue.js anywhere within this element that we're targeting. Type data. Now the data is where we can kind of store variables to use throughout our HTML page. So let's do header text, and then say for now, just hello world. And then instead of hello world up here, they have this templating syntax, which Visual Studio Code decided to fill some of it in for us. But it's essentially 2 brackets on this side and two curly brackets on the left, 2 curly brackets on the right. And inside we can actually type the actual name here that we've set this hello world to. Okay, now before we go any further, I want to open this back up. Yeah, it just took a second to render. Okay, cool. So now we can see that our Vue is indeed working. The next step is going to be to actually tie an event or method to this button, and it's going to change the text. That's our main goal to finish up basically this tutorial. So we're going to need what's known as a method section that Vue.js provides for us. And then let's create a method called change text. That's the syntax for creating a method. Now we can tie into anything in the data section with the keyword this. So we type this, then header text. Smart enough to say, Visual Studio smart enough to say, hey, is that what you want? Yes, that is what we want. I'm going to type it. And then just, I don't know, changed, right? And essentially, the other thing we have to do is when we click the button, we have to tie it to this method. And Vue provides this v-on syntax here. And you do v-on : click, and then equal sign, and then inside the double quotes, we're just going to type the name of the method that we created, which is change text. So save that file. I use Control S. We could always come up here to File, Save. It's always an option as well. Then now if we go back and we run this again, we'll see, yes, it says hello world. And then if we click change text, changes it. It is that simple. You can literally use that CDN with any HTML page that you have. It's really, really easy, and it's super nice. If you have an existing web page that you don't want to have to totally rewrite because maybe it's complicated or it'd be too time intensive and you're doing other things, just don't have time for that. This is a super good option to kind of make your web pages a little more modern, maybe with a legacy app or technology maybe that you didn't start off thinking about, using a library like Vue Js, which has so many nice features and does so much for us on the front end. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stick around, subscribe. Hoping to have some new videos out soon with content just like this. If you have any suggestions on things you want to learn, don't hesitate to put a comment. I'm certainly open, and hope you guys learned a lot. Thanks for joining me.